Respecting everyone's time, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, and welcome to the GW Cancer Center's webinar on engaging survivors in comprehensive cancer control coalitions. I'm Lisa Fuse. I'm a technical assistance coordinator at the GW Cancer Center. I'm also a cancer survivor, and I'll serve as moderator for today's discussion. Just a couple of housekeeping details. All of the attendees' lines are muted, but please feel free to type questions in the chat at any time. Okay. So today's agenda is first, we are going to introduce to you a terrific panel. They'll each give a brief introduction of themselves, and then we'll go into our moderated discussion with time for Q&A at the end, and then we will wrap up and adjourn. So today's panelists, we have Beth Seeloff, who is the Cancer Control Program Manager at the Intertribal Council of Michigan. Catherine Young, who is the Director of the Mississippi Cancer Control Program. And Maureen Higgins, the Community Engagement Coordinator at the Dempsey Center in Maine. Okay, Beth, I'm going to stop sharing. And I'll ask you to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Beth Seeloff, and I am able to serve at the Intertribal Council of Michigan as a public health specialist and cancer control program manager. The Intertribal Council of Michigan is a recipient of a Comp Cancer grant, and we are the Three Fires Comprehensive Cancer Control Program. The Three Fires represents the cultures and tribes of the Michigan, 12 Michigan tribal communities, and we support 17 health centers. And I am very grateful to be here today to share the lessons we've learned and the culture that we support in our communities.
Thanks, Beth. Catherine?
Hello, everyone. My name is Catherine Young. I'm the director of the Mississippi Comprehensive Cancer Control Program. And prior to my joining the Mississippi Comprehensive Cancer Control Program only a year ago in March, I was the senior vice president for Susan G. Komen Breast Cancer Foundation. And I hope to provide information on my prior experience of engaging cancer survivors in the work that we do, and how this will filter over into the work that I'm doing today with our coalitions. We have 5 coalition regions over the state of Mississippi, and we are actively seeking opportunities to make sure that our cancer survivors are at the forefront of everything that we do.
Thanks, Catherine. Maureen?
Hi, everyone, and thanks for having me here. I appreciate this. My name is Maureen Higgins, and I work at the Dempsey Center, and we are located in Maine. We have 2 physical locations, one in Lewiston, one in South Portland, and we also have Dempsey Connects, which is our virtual platform, so we're able to cover the state of Maine and actually beyond that throughout the U.S. for some of our programs. I'm a little bit different in that our program we work with anyone impacted by cancer at any place along their journey. All of our programs are at no cost. We offer counseling and support groups with licensed clinical social workers. We have our movement and fitness program offering consults as well as a variety of different classes. We have our complementary therapies program, which includes acupuncture and Reiki and oncology massage. We offer our Healing Tree program, which is sort of a microcosm of all of our programs, but meant for children and families. So these are children often who are impacted by cancer. They may have a parent or grandparent diagnosed. We also have nutrition services. So again, we can see people in consult, or we offer a variety of different classes. And then we offer education classes. So things like cancer and financial health, or fatigue factor, or communicating with your healthcare team. So a variety of different topics that might arise. So those are some of the services that we provide.
Super. Thanks, Maureen. Okay, let's jump into our discussion. So my first question for all of you, how are members of your coalition engaged in determining how best to involve cancer survivors?
You want me to go first?
Sure.
Okay. So the Intertribal Council of Michigan, as I said, is a forum for our tribal health centers, right? And so our work is culturally based, right? To ensure that we are meeting the cultural and spiritual needs of our community, and to ensure that we're addressing all barriers to care. Our coalition members work with organizations like George Washington Cancer Center, right, to provide these education opportunities to our providers, who in turn introduce us to survivors, right? So, and then our survivors give us insight to how we should frame our programs. So we have done a lot of work. So, you know, instead of pushing down, right, our programs into the clinics, we actually utilize the clinics to lift our programs up, and our clinics are our connections to our survivors. So we learn and interview from our survivors, right? We interview the survivors, understand their needs, and base our work plan and a program objectives on the needs of our survivors, which can be different from each tribal community. Each tribal community is sovereign. And so the resources available within each community are vastly different. And so we are learning the lessons, so from region to region, on what they need. And that's how we build our framework.
Thanks. Maureen and Catherine?
Thank you. So we have 5 regions, and we're just a little bit different in the fact that we have a diverse population of individuals, and we try to gear all of our work based on our data. And so working with our multiple cancer centers throughout the state, we work with them to, of course, provide information for us, but the recruitment of our survivors is left back on us with our coalitions. And the essence of the reason why I said some of our, is a little bit different, because we use a grassroots approach in order to recruit survivors, because not all of the time we have the opportunity for the cancer centers to provide us with information and names of the individuals at the cancer centers. So we rely heavily on our coalition members to recruit survivors, and we use their recruitment efforts in faith-based organizations, community organizations, as well as wherever we can find them. And one of the approaches that we've used, instead of the cancer center not being able to provide us with the information, we provide a piece of material, literature, or something that prompts the survivor. Once they get the piece of material, then they provide their email address and contact information. And at that point, we begin to date the survivor. So, and what I mean by date that survivor, we begin to learn a little bit more about them, what their cancers are, communicate with them. If they have a birthday, we try to, get as much information as we can. And during the course of the time, then when their birthday come up, we send a shout out to them about their birthday. If they're in a particular region, we've set up a coalition, which is our coalition. It's called the MP3C. We have an MP3C Facebook page, and we put shout outs to certain survivors when their birthday come up, or if they've gone through treatment and they're newly out of treatment, then we give them a shout out as well. So our recruitment, to those, they serve as a as a genuine purpose because we want to know what those survivors needs. And so another aspect is we have done a needs assessment, similar to what Beth has said. So the needs assessment is for us to gather additional information, and the link was sent out broadly throughout the state to community partners, healthcare systems, and that entail also provided us with additional survivors that we may or may not have gotten through our normal avenues of recruitment.
Great. Okay, thank you. So really a multi-pronged approach. And Maureen.
So again, I'm going to start a little differently here. Kind of within our organization, I would say that, you know, obviously the people that we work with are the survivors and anywhere along that cancer journey. But in addition to sort of the people that we're working with, we have a client advisory council. So that's made up of people who have accessed our services in a variety of different ways, have utilized different services, may have used in-person, may have used virtual, may have used both. So again, making sure we have a nice cross-section. And that's part of the way that we get some information about the types of programming that we would offer. In addition to that, we utilize volunteers who, again, by and large, are survivors. So they're at a different place in their journey and looking to give back. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But we also belong to the Association of Maine Cancer Support Centers. So these are like-minded organizations within the state of Maine who offer supports to cancer survivors who are not within a medical treatment facility. And so within this, we're coming up with our own strategic plan about how we reach out to folks and really assess what are the gaps in need throughout our state so that we can, as an association, look to address some of those. And in addition to that, different members of the association, and certainly myself, I sit on a variety of committees within the Maine Cancer Impact Network, which is part of our consortium, so that we make sure that we're bringing some of those voices there and including people who might be interested. That's one of the beautiful things about the consortiums, right, is that they're open to all. And so it's really finding that connection between where someone's passion is and helping them find that avenue to utilize that. So that's part of that connection that we can help make.
Super. So just as a follow-up, because you all mentioned the different routes you take to recruit survivors, are there any particular strategies that you have found successful in your outreach to, for example, to a clinic, to an oncology practice, to another organization? I don't know if any of you outreach to maybe national organizations that have a local presence. If there are any methods you found particularly useful.
So as far as our organization and working with our tribal communities, ours is very relationship based, right? We serve a smaller population, and based on history and culture, we have to build these relationships, right? So we have relationships with the primary care centers where the survivors' primary care is delivered, and they have the closest relationships with the patients. We've found that going to a cancer center really isn't applicable to the work we do, right? So our outreach is directly to the primary care center. We let the health educators and the providers know what type of work we're trying to support and what we're advocating for. And they often give us, right, a referral. So they often say, you know, Chris or Maya, Kelly may be a good candidate, right? They may be interested, because not everyone wants to share their story, right? And not everyone's comfortable, but also our partnerships, right? So we serve a rural area, but we also have our partner, the American Indian Cancer Foundation, and they serve urban communities. And so that partnership there, right? So they have their relationships with the urban clinics. We have our relationships with the rural clinics, and that often brings together some beautiful partnerships, right? So we try to look outside so we can see better inside, right? And I have to say that some of the strategies, we outreach to organizations, but we also utilize social media, right? We have a platform on Instagram and Facebook called Quay Brave, which means brave woman in Ojibwe. And we have actually found some women there who have supported us and the American Indian Cancer Foundation in our work to identify the needs of survivors. So.
Terrific. Thanks. Catherine Murray.
I think for us, we have utilized our federally qualified healthcare centers and cancer centers into engaging our survivors. And we have a piece of literature that we provide, across the state to what the Comprehensive Cancer Control Program is, what of our goals and objectives are. But one of our most definitive pieces of that is our executive board. So we formulated an executive board that was made up of, doctors, lay people, nurses, social workers that were across the state. And they guided us into getting into some of the cancer centers and the healthcare systems, because for us it was a little bit difficult. We've had some relationships, but building those relationships, we had to rely heavily on those people that were already in those centers, and that has been a really big help. So forming those partnerships and relationships came from our executive board that were already members of certain groups, medical societies, nursing societies, social work societies, and community organizations, and allowed them to talk about our program and what we were trying to do, be a part of our, round tables, and we will host round tables to discuss that were geared towards providers to let them know what we were doing. And in turn, we only have a program which we work with called PAC Health. It's a digital health coaching where we were able to connect survivors to digital health coaching, a 12-week coaching program, but it allowed us to receive additional survivors and connections with those individuals, referring them to the program. And then the program that we were funding was giving us information about the survivors.
Thank you.
Great.
All
So
right.
we've done a couple different things. One is listening tours throughout the state. So both for folks who are, and it was really open to anybody in the community, and then specific to healthcare providers. So really to get some input about what do different areas in the state need. And that's been really, really helpful. Certainly with the Dempsey Center, we have very strong connections with the oncology practices throughout the state, and maintaining those relationships so that they have a good understanding of how we can continue to support the patients with whom they're currently working, again, throughout their journey, as well as their care partners. And then in addition to that, with our coalition, so Maine Impact Cancer Network, there are a variety of task forces, so people can really choose the thing that speaks best to them. And one of those task forces was survivorship and rehab that I sat on. And within that task force, we wanted to talk about advocacy and how do you invite people with lived experience to use their voice. And so I believe the title was Finding Your Voice. And we had different survivors and we hosted that through the Dempsey Center. So this was something that came out of the coalition. The Dempsey Center hosted the program, and we did it virtually so that it was available to anybody in the state. And we had different survivors talk about sort of different buckets of advocacy. So somebody might advocate in a way by helping out at the American Cancer Society and doing a particular thing there. Somebody else, their advocacy might be in fundraising for a particular organization. Somebody else, their advocacy might be being involved in the Maine Cancer Impact Network. And so we had people from different walks who chose different ways and oftentimes talked about their journey of advocacy. Because for many people, of course, you say the word advocacy and what you think of is marching to the Capitol or something like this. And that's not everybody's cup of tea. And so it was really doing some education about what some of those things might be and how people might choose to get involved. And that was a really successful program to be able to encourage people to make some choices about things that they may not have considered before.
It's so interesting to hear, because again, this is exactly what we were hoping for, the different perspectives, because Beth is saying they go through the primary care clinics, not the oncology practices. For Maureen, it is the oncology practices. Catherine, it's the executive board. So I'm sure that like our listeners are finding this really helpful. So in talking about recruiting, what kind of barriers have you encountered, whether they're just barriers in general, barriers to recruiting a diverse group of volunteers, or barriers to meaningfully engaging and retaining your survivor volunteers? And I'm going to switch up the order this time, just so everyone's on their toes. Catherine, what do you think?
I think for us, we created a peer-to-peer survivors program, which was geared towards recruiting survivors that were older, not older in age, but have survived longer, to pair up with survivors that were newly diagnosed and was going through the process. And I think one of the barriers with that program, a wonderful program, but oftentimes we found some individuals didn't want to tell their story, and having a diverse group of individuals was very difficult. So essentially we wanted to look at be very diverse and inclusive, just in case we have individuals that needed that service. And so we had a really hard time, because we found that especially in the African American community, we're not as open at times to want to tell what we've gone through, the changes in our bodies, and not feeling as if we were a woman, and all of these issues and barriers were brought up. But we could take another population and they were okay with telling what had happened, and encouraging to other individuals. So being able to dispel some of those issues and bring a diverse group of individuals together. We're still working towards that, but that has been one of our things that have, stifled the growth of that program. But we are hosting survivors only meetings, and some of these survivor only meetings that are geared towards the peer-to-peer aspect of it is educating individuals about what this looked like. And we're also doing survivors to train them as community health workers. This is also one of the things that get them out of their shell, in order to, you don't have to tell your story in an aspect. Just being able to be a listener could also be your peer-to-peer support for somebody else. So being able to explain, to individuals that we have all gone through something, and just being able to share and for them to be comfortable is to meet other survivors. And through the hosting of these meetings, then we find that individuals are beginning to be more comfortable with expression and showing that they have limitations, but they can overcome some of those barriers as well.
Thanks. Maureen?
Sure. So some of the barriers, I would say that pre-pandemic, we did not have a virtual platform. And so we were in 2 physical locations, and we had sort of we were open to anybody, but we had sort of a circumscribed area that that we received folks from, and that could access our services. And then post-pandemic, or actually during the pandemic, we opened our doors a little more widely with the virtual services. And so then it was the state of Maine, which is geographically large and rural, with a lot of diverse types of populations there. We have a significant New Mainer population. So immigrants that have come in, so some language barriers. So those for us are still some of the challenges, whether it be within our center or whether it be within the larger coalition of Maine Impact Cancer Network. Just, how do we make sure that we're being inclusive and that we're understanding? And I think a lot of that is as a coalition, is backing up a step or two and saying, we actually need some education first. So as opposed to extending the invitation first, it's extending, can you help us understand better? And that's been one of the things that is, I think, making a difference.
Super. And Beth.
Hi, I'm going to actually almost highlight what Maureen and Catherine both stated, right? I love that Catherine brought up about the hesitancy to share, right, among the Black community, to share the impacts of cancer treatment, right? It's very personal, and in our tribal communities, the culture is privacy, right, and trust. And so, becoming acquainted, right, with the needs, right, of the communities you're serving, right, and gaining that trust, and making sure that they gain your trust, but you show it back, right? And like, you're going to trust that they are going to be present when they agree to, and we're going to give them the trust that we're going to share their story respectfully, right, and not exploit it. And often when we hit these barriers, right, we often reach a barrier where like they're hesitant to participate. We often show them like stories so when it comes to like a digital story or recorded voice recording or a video recording, we show them others that we've done, right, or partners have done, to show them what type of story it would be and how it will support the community. And often it's a gift to their family, right? Like, these recorded stories are often a gift to their family, because we let the survivors take it where they need to take it. We're there for them. And so I think if we show that we were providing a gift, in essence, of them giving to us, we would like to give to them. I think that's often because the gift they give to us allows us to serve others. And so that we break through potential barriers like that. And also it's, as Maureen was talking about, the survivor circles, right? And so ACAF, our partner at the American Indian Cancer Foundation, they have survivor circles where no medical staff are allowed, right? It's just survivors, and they've had great success. I mean, they started that virtual talking circle in 2020 after March, right? And they've had a lot of participants there. And then from there, we have partnered with the American Indian Cancer Foundation, and survivors that we have recruited and survivors that they have recruited have offered to become panelists. So we've built these relationships that expand, beyond our organization, and which is really nice to see.
Yeah, fabulous. So this is great. I mean, we've heard a lot of different ways that survivors are involved. one thing we know is that survivors' stories, when treated respectfully, as Beth mentioned, are very impactful for policy and for education purposes. And what strategies have you used to engage survivors in that kind of advocacy activities for more policy and system changes? Maureen, do you want to go first?
I guess I'll jump back to some of the programming that we've done around advocacy. So again, giving people tools, giving people options. So I won't say that that was toward a specific policy change, but using survivors as part of the panel who talked about how they did that, and that this is something that any of you can also do if there is something that you feel strongly and are passionate about. So we offered sort of the legwork, the tools for people to be able to do that, although it was not focused on a specific policy issue.
Beth?
So we use their stories to advocate for others, right? So what we learn, like from our Medicaid patients who are traveling 6 to 8 hours because there's only 2 health centers in a state, right, that accept Medicaid for cancer treatment. And so we use those stories for advocacy. We use access, there's stories about access for care or that disconnect, right, from their spiritual life. And we have been able to do this. I really want to make sure I mention that GW Cancer Center, right, has been very integral in the steps in upward mobility of our survivorship coalition. They partnered with us to talk to our providers about cancer survivorship in rural communities and in primary care centers, right? How to support cancer survivors. And from there, it blossomed, right? The best ideas for supporting survivors came from our clinic staff, whether it was a health educator or a nurse, a lab technician or receptionist, and their stories as caregivers, right? And then we take those same stories, right, and to put in our toolbox to advocate for our survivors. So the barriers are there, we take them down, and then once we take them down, these beautiful stories that are given to us allow us to implement policy and advocacy tools. So
Thanks. Catherine.
If I can use my prior experience with Coleman, they did a wonderful job with advocacy and advocating. But one of the things that, I would like to highlight was the fact that engaging survivors in the advocacy work was one of the most powerful things that, anyone could ever do. Having the face of an individual that, could not get treatment because of certain laws or policies that were in place, or could not get a diagnostic mammogram because of high cost of the screening, because of insurance barrier, is one of the most powerful things that you can ever put before a lawmaker. And we use those survivors to relate that because the policymakers are just individuals just like we are. We find that they have gone through cancer some type, some form of fashion in their own lives, whether it's their selves, their wives, mothers, children, somebody. And having a survivor stand before a group of individuals and let them know how that impacted them and their constituents in their respective areas, and how it has delineated their families. And this is one of the things that I believe is one of the most powerful things that you could ever do. Even if taking a picture, we've used taking pictures of those that have passed away, to highlight and signify that this is the things that happen because of certain laws that we have in place. And those survivors are the ones that carry this message because they are the ones that this has personally impacted. Now, on the end that certain things impact us as individuals as well as family members, as co-survivors and caregivers of those individuals that are survivors. But there is nothing more greater than having that actual survivor or the family member or someone who has passed away. We've engaged our survivors by teaching them what we call advocacy 101. What to look for, what your different lawmakers, what chairs they sit on, who are the key players, and just having this background information equips them to when they're in front of them, they know exactly how to give their story. We also hosted something similar to what Maureen said, but it was called In My Own Voice. And In My Own Voice was just that. It was telling your story in a way that it compels individuals, not so much but to let them know that the impact that this has and how many more individuals that it can impact. And that was a significant win for us. And so having that tool, giving them everything that they need. So, and not only just going to the Capitol, because going to the Capitol one time doesn't change anything, right? So we have to, just like we date survivors, we have to date our policymakers, and equipping our survivors with dating our policymaker, being there and being present, working with, certain organizations, because of course, as a government organization, we can't lobby ourselves, but the coalitions can. And we work with American Cancer Society and some of the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, some of those individual organizations that can lobby. And so connecting the survivors with them and being able to, share that information is one tool that we found that has been really successful.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and that really leads into my next question, which is what kind of training, be it with staff or your infrastructure, supports the survivor engagement? You talked a little bit about training just now. I was going to ask about training. If maybe you have you also mentioned a mentor situation with an existing survivor might pair with a new survivor. But let's take a minute to talk about the training that survivors receive. Beth?
So in our organization, right, we don't, we cannot legally lobby. So our survivors, as far as training, we teach them to be comfortable with themselves, right? And to be able to share their story in a way that's comfortable for them. So all of us are trained to educate and promote, right? And so we have just a little bit of a different type of organization, is that our stories we share, we get permission, we share the videos, and we advocate with academic institutions, health systems, and then we ask if the survivor will attend with us to share their voice. But we're very particular, right? We don't recruit survivors for organizations will reach out to us and want to recruit for advocacy. And we're very, very specific about who we refer to the survivors that support our organization. So yeah, sorry, we're just a little bit different there, right?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Catherine.
So in my current role, we're similar to Beth. We can't lobby, but what we've done is our coalition is the avenue in which some of the things that can happen. So we equip them with those those trainings. We have those trainings where we actually tell them, what advocacy 101 is, and go through the process, and having connecting them with, the different organizations that can, whether that's a national organization like, ACS, Susan G. Komen, or, the other Leukemia Lymphoma Society and the others that are doing advocacy work. We also in turn email all of the members of the coalition when something is going on. If there's a new policy that's being introduced, or a new bill that's being introduced, then certainly, we in turn can, tell our coalitions to email or to contact members of the coalition, community members, survivors, and they can actually, as a process, take action based on whatever actions that are in the bill. But I think being able to have them interconnected with everything that concerns them is basically for us through our coalitions and partnerships with those outside entities. And we are heavily, engaged in making sure that everything that come across our desk because that we in turn provide that information. So just being a resource, I guess for us, we're the resource houser of the information that we gather from the different groups, and in turn we send that out to our survivors, and however they take action on it, is up to them. But we've equip them with the information that they need to make an informed decision on what they would like to participate in or support as far as new bills that are going across.
Okay. Thanks. Maureen?
Sure. So I think I'll start smaller again. In terms of training, I mentioned our Client Advisory Council, for example, and we're very specific about, again, sort of what we're looking for, making sure that we have a nice cross-section of individual experiences on that council. There's an application process. There is an interview, a couple of them, and then if somebody's it's a good fit for everybody. And then there's a training that happens for that advisory council. Same thing with our volunteers. We have specific volunteer jobs that we're looking for, and there's a very specific training that goes along with those volunteer jobs that we offer. One that sort of the baseline that everybody, whether you're a new staff member or whether you're a volunteer with our organization, that everybody gets, and then more specific to that particular position as well. So making sure that we have good matches there. So that's sort of more the microcosm piece. And then in terms of sort of the advocacy, we're not, we don't have an advocacy arm, but if there is an ask for somebody specific, we can sort of, again, very much like what Beth was talking about, we don't sort of put it out there to everybody and everything. But if there's somebody that might fit that bill who's indicated an interest, then we might be able to make some connections in that way. But a lot of what we do then is by being involved in the greater coalition, as well as the Association of Maine Cancer Support Centers, is just to make sure that we're aware of what are the different things going on, so that if we are asked questions, we can encourage people to go to the right people to talk with, and then be able to share their stories in that way.
Okay. I want to make sure to leave enough time for questions, but there are two more questions I would like to ask the panel first. So my first question is along the lines of what we've been discussing. Have any of you incorporated into your procedure acquainting a survivor volunteer with the scope of action that's feasible for a coalition to take? And the reason I ask this is because I joined the Maryland Cancer Council and initially felt very intimidated because I was in a room with a lot of clinicians and people that had been in the cancer space for a long time, and wasn't really sure of what my role could be potentially. But at one point they were brainstorming about an upcoming conference for survivors, and they asked for ideas for sessions. And a personal interest of mine as a survivor is premature aging. So I thought, finally, I have a suggestion that I could do something. But I know that it can be daunting for someone coming in and suggesting things that may just not be in the scope of something realistic for a coalition. A mamma van, for example, to do mobile, so have you run into this? And if so, how have you addressed it? And I'll just, whoever has a thought on that, feel free to go ahead.
I can talk on a little bit different side of this. We often, as the Intertribal Council, we're very visible among the state and nationally. And we often get an ask from an organization because they're trying to diversify, right, their survivor groups, and they'll ask us if we can help them recruit, right? But we do a lot of research before we even recommend, right, someone to support a group, and we ensure that the mission of the coalition looking for survivor representatives from the tribal communities, their culture and vision and mission is in line with the culture of our tribal communities and Native Americans and Alaska Natives as a whole, right? And so because we've run into the circumstance where we don't want to promise the moon, right? And so that we want everyone to be understanding of the culture of American Indians and Alaska Natives, the needs of them, and then ensure that that the organization is a good fit for the individual. So that's just one aspect of what we do, because we don't ever want to put somebody in a position, right, that makes them uncomfortable or makes them feel like they can't do anything, right? Like making sure that their voice is heard. And we want to ensure that happens.
Super, thanks. Catherine?
Well, I think, and this is just probably my personal opinion more than anything, is that survivors have something to offer, big or small, no matter what it is, and having them to share their different perspective. It is a great opportunity for us to learn. And although some things may seem far-fetched or out of the reach, just having them being able to express themselves and trusting us enough that they can say certain things, and and we're not in a sense looking as if, oh, that's out of the way, not accomplishable, but something that we can work towards. And I think just being able to have them to share that information, no matter what it is a good opportunity for us to continue to learn. Because all things, some things may not work. Just as you mentioned, the memo van, in certain populations and certain things, that the memo van might not work. But to educate that survivor that even suggested that, not to say that their idea was such a bad idea, but these are the situations that we are facing, the reason why we may not can have one. And if they're able to help, then how are you able to assist us in better crafting a way that we can get screenings out to a certain population for the reason why you suggested the memo van. And I think being inclusive and just listening and taking a step back is where survivors really want to be, in a space where they can suggest things and they can be comfortable enough that we take them in a perspective where it's not taken the wrong way, but we can guide them in the steps that, if it's a good idea, okay, this is how you can help us to get there. If it's maybe not in our scope of practice or is not as easy, but it can be accomplished, then how can we all get on board to accomplish this? And if it's something that can't, then that's, a conversation of outlining to them some of the things that reasons why it can't. But a lot of times, I think that, this is one of the reasons why survivors feel intimidated, and they feel non-inclusive, because they feel like that they can't share things because it's viewed as dumb, or where did you get that idea from? So I've always taken an all-inclusive approach to, whatever a survivor has to say, then listen to it and take it in perspective, and then go back to the drawing board and say, well, this is the reason why we can or cannot do that.
Gotcha. Thanks. And Marie.
Yeah, I love what you said, Catherine. And just being a participant on some of the task forces for Maine Impact Cancer Network, I've certainly seen where there have been ideas brought forth by survivors, and sometimes it's a little out of the box, right? And we get sort of, oh, this is the way we do things. And to hear that and go, just like you said, you're like, oh, well, let's talk about that. And that's one of the things I really valued about the task forces, is that is really sort of the philosophy there. Things get talked about and figured out. Certainly there are people that are part of the more bureaucratic system that come in with ideas, and we're all like, oh, no. So it goes both directions, right? And so really important to have those conversations to allow people who have maybe been there a little longer to think differently, and see if there's something that might come of that. It may not be exactly that, but something that we can have. Or to your point, also having that opportunity to educate. That is such a great idea. And these are the things that get in our way. Can we talk about some of those? Is there a different way that we can approach this? I'd also have to say that, like both of you who've been talking, Beth and Catherine, that we have such diverse geography, populations, different things so to get those different ideas is really, really powerful and allows us to just think differently.
Well, thank you. I was going to ask for a piece of advice from each of you, but I may include that in the follow-up notes because I do want to leave enough time for questions for you. I see there's one already for Beth, which is, are there cancer case managers in all of the health centers to help navigate the cancer patients?
Actually, no. So it's usually a nurse or an additional duty of someone, right? So, but that is changing, right? So 4 years ago, I would say it's not present anywhere, but the work we've done with educating providers, right, on the needs of cancer survivors and the needs of family members, and as Catherine stated, the co-survivors, right? We've brought this to the top, and it's present everywhere. And now clinic staff are taking this on as their own, right? And they're doing the navigation and they're checking up. And we even have, we have developed toolkits for use in our primary health systems. It's a community toolkit. We're actually going to publish it in June, that survivors can take with them, right? So that their family members and the survivors and their primary care providers can use in their care. So
if you would be interested in sharing that toolkit when it's available, I'm sure there are others who might love to see that.
I will. We're making it editable, so by anyone, so that they can use it for their own health centers. Yeah.
Terrific. That sounds great. Thank you. Catherine, we have a question. Did you have any resistance from cancer centers in sharing survivor contact info with you? And if so, how did you get around that?
Yes, so we have a lot of resistance, because everybody is big on HIPAA and not providing, protected health information. So our work around that was, a piece of literature, a bag or something that we were, give to the cancer centers. And one of the things that they had to do in order to, get this was they had to provide their contact information. So if we had a goodie bag that had our, a pen in it and, just some ordinary little thing with some literature in it, then getting their information was how we were able to connect to survivors. So yes, it was very difficult, and being able to work around that, it could look like that in different forms, but we found that has not been as successful, because even, with the little goodie bags or literature, people are still sort of hesitant in the fact of wanting to give their information. And it's not like a, $100 Walmart gift card or anything like that. So, some people would enjoy it and say, oh yeah, I'll do it. And then others, they, really wouldn't. But if I could just say for 2 seconds, when we were doing the Susan G. Komen walks and stuff and working with cancer centers, then when we did registrations or complimentary registrations for cancer centers for cancer survivors, then this was an easy way for us to capture some of our survivors. We would do, maybe 50 complimentary registrations for every cancer center to participate, and they would get, the free t-shirt. They would also get access to the survivors tent where they get breakfast and things like this. So this was more appealing for, survivors when engaging and actually registering for stuff. But on the side of the Come Cancer program, it still has been a challenge and very difficult.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks. So we only have 2 minutes left. So I am going to very quickly launch this poll. It's only 3 questions for our attendees. If you could just answer these, we really rely on you for evaluation of our events. That would be great. And okay, can you see it? The poll? Okay. I want to thank so much Maureen and Catherine and Beth for your time today, for your insight. This has been so valuable, and we will send out a link to the recording for this session, along with a few resources that might be helpful in recruiting volunteers. Certainly, if you have questions for us, because we really have run out of time for other questions, please feel free to email. And I just thank you all so much for being with us today.